Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream, and thank you so much for tuning in for another show. There have been a lot of updates about the ceasefire, the leaks about the Witkoff proposal, so many back and forth reports coming from the United States and from the Arab media, Israeli media too. But now we have an official leak that came following a report coming from Al Arabiya Network that's based in Saudi Arabia about the agreement itself. There are some reports in Israel about the Israeli side accepting this proposal. Now, what's not very clear so far is whether this is the same proposal that Hamas had agreed upon already yesterday when we spoke about it, or we're talking about a new proposal with slight adjustments coming from the American side so that Israel can agree to the ceasefire today. What's for sure is that there are certain developments. All of the details are out. I'm not sure if they were supposed to be out or not. Usually they don't publish all of the information. And there is one person missing from all of this and is going to hospital with Yariv Levin, his deputy, taking his position. That's none other than Benjamin Netanyahu. Apparently he has this important health condition, routine, according to Israeli media. I'm not sure if the man is in bad health or if he had a heart attack or something. But it's a convenient time, despite the fact that, again, some reports are saying that the Israeli side accepted it, with total silence coming from the main people who oppose the actual ceasefire, especially Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, inside of Israel. So we've had a couple of versions out, one of them in Arabic, one of them in English. I'm going to go through the English version because going through them very briefly, browsing through them, they had a lot of similarities. So we'll go with the English version about the ceasefire agreement and all of the details about it, some interesting information, including interesting information that will not be released up until a later stage. So this is the first paper here talking about clauses 1 to 6, framework for negotiating an agreement to a permanent ceasefire. So we're still not talking about the agreement itself. It's a framework. However, the framework is very important because the details are some of the things that caused the problem. So it appears that Steve Witkoff and the American side are trying to have a wider and broader framework for both sides to agree upon, leaving certain things deliberately out of the picture. Some people might consider that to be a concession or a step back from the Israeli side. But again, it's not mentioned here. There might be further information coming afterwards, or the final details could be published at the time of signing or just before the time of signing. So the first caller spoke about the duration, 60-day ceasefire. President Trump guarantees Israel's adherence to the ceasefire during the agreed upon period. This is very important because this is a direct confirmation that Donald Trump himself will be overseeing this agreement and confirming that Israel adheres to this agreement. So far, the negotiations that have been happening in Qatar were between the Palestinian side and the American side. Israel left the ceasefire talks several weeks back, and clearly the American administration have reached a common language with the Palestinian negotiator. However, the Israelis, they took themselves out of the picture, and Donald Trump understands that he needs to chip in, he needs to be in the picture. Apart from the fact that this was a Palestinian demand anyway, the Palestinian side wanted guarantees, and in this agreement you will see a couple of guarantees coming from the American side. To the release of hostages, 10 Israeli live hostages and 18 deceased hostages from the list of 58 to be released in days 1 and 7. Half of the living deceased hostages, 5 living and 9 deceased, will be released on day 1 of the agreement. The remaining half of the hostages, 5 living and 9 deceased, will be released on day 7. 3, humanitarian assistance aid will be sent to the Gaza immediately once Hamas agrees to the ceasefire agreement. Whatever agreement is reached on aid to the civilian population will be respected throughout the course of the agreement. Aid will be distributed through agreed upon channels that will include the United Nations and the Red Crescent. This is a very significant development because we're no longer talking about this Gaza humanitarian foundation. We're talking about the United Nations, most likely UNRWA channels too, and the Red Crescent, alongside probably other regular aid and charitable organizations that have been working in Gaza previously. This is another concession coming from Israel that insisted on this mechanism working, with American mercenaries controlling the aid going into the Gaza Strip, that proved to be a massive failure in the past few days, especially with, well, people being shot and killed just for going to get aid in what looked like the apocalypse. I mean, a dystopian state, really, what was happening in Gaza in the past few days. Four, this is a very important bit, the Israeli military activities, all Israeli offensive military activities in Gaza will cease upon this agreement entering into force. During the ceasefire period, there will be a cessation of aerial movement, military and surveillance in the Gaza Strip for 10 hours daily or 12 hours daily during when exchange of hostages and prisoners take place. This is, again, another move that Israel said previously that it will not agree to, but the reports in Israel are saying that Israel agreed to this understanding, this agreement for the ceasefire. And again, what we need to understand about this, and something very important, the framework is called a framework for negotiating an agreement to a permanent ceasefire. That means Israel will stop military activities, 10 hours on a normal day, 12 hours during the days where prisoners of war will be released. IDF redeployment. Yesterday, the reports in Israel said that Israel will not be redeploying to areas that it was in before the temporary ceasefire that took place. Phase one, the last ceasefire, the previous one was the temporary ceasefire back in end of 2023, beginning of 2024. On day one, after the release of the Israeli hostages, a redeployment to the northern part of Gaza Strip and the Netzarim corridor in accordance to Article 3 regarding the humanitarian aid and based on maps agreed upon. On day 7, after the release of the Israeli hostages, redeployment in the south and in accordance with Article 3 regarding the humanitarian aid and based upon maps agreed upon. The technical teams will work the final redeployment boundaries during proximity negotiations. Again, Israel will be withdrawing, that means, from the northern parts of Gaza, from the Netzarim again, and from what they call the Morag location, which is in the Rafah area. Israel created a new buffer zone several kilometers wide. Of course, they're not successful with it anyway. The Palestinian Resistance has been giving them a significant beating in the past few weeks in that area. But they're going to be withdrawing from that, but not from the Philadelphia corridor. Philadelphia corridor is still going to be something that they'll be talking about to continue the talks about the permanent ceasefire after that. Now, in relation to the negotiations, because this is a framework, it's supposed to be a framework for a full ceasefire, a full permanent ceasefire that will be long lasting. They're saying on day one, negotiations under the auspices of the mediators, guarantors on the necessary agreements, arrangements for a permanent ceasefire will commence, including keys and terms for the exchange of all remaining Israeli hostages for a number to be agreed upon of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli prisons. Issues relating to redeployment and withdrawals of Israeli forces and long-term security arrangements within the Gaza Strip, arrangements relating to the day after in Gaza, which would be raised by the other side, and the announcement of a permanent ceasefire. This is very important because previously, the agreement said that they will start talks on phase 2 after at least a couple of weeks from the beginning of the last ceasefire that took place. And now they're saying from day one, it's not going to stop. We're going to talk about ending the war completely. We're not going to leave it like we did last time, because they don't want to be in a situation where they will go back to square one following another treacherous Israeli move. And the American side, it appears to be that they are interested indeed in reaching a permanent ceasefire now, unlike previous times. I mean, the United States previously said that they're interested in a permanent ceasefire. They were not taking the required action to do that. I mean, there's a big argument that now still they are not taking all of the action required to stop it. However, things are changing, and we've been speaking about them in the past couple of weeks, especially with the tensions that are happening between the Trump administration and Israel. Now, there are clauses 7 to 13, which are also interesting. Presidential support. The president is serious about the parties' adherence to the ceasefire agreement and insists that the negotiations during the temporary ceasefire period, if successfully concluded with the agreement between both parties, would lead to a permanent resolution of the conflict. And we're talking about President Donald Trump here. Again, a clause designated specifically for him. That's another one. Two clauses now are directly so far talking about Donald Trump. And there's another one talking about Trump and another one talking about Steve Witkoff. It shows you how persistent the Palestinian side was to get the guarantees from the American side rather than the Israelis, because there is no trust whatsoever between them and the Israelis, and there was of course tensions between them and the American side, but at the end of the day they were talking directly with the American side, which signals a shift in the American position, of course, firstly, and then that there is progress despite the Israeli pressure to hinder all of the talks that are happening directly between Hamas and the United States. They still continued, and as a matter of fact the United States reached an agreement with Yemen, which indicates that they can reach an agreement with Hamas too. 8, the release of Palestinian prisoners. This is a very important bit because there are many thousands of Palestinian prisoners inside of the Israeli prison. In exchange for the release of 10 Israeli live hostages consistent with the terms and conditions of Phase 1 of the January 19, 2025 agreement regarding the hostages and prisoners, Israel will release 125 life sentence prisoners and 1,111 Gazan detainees who were detained after October the 7th, 2023. In exchange for the release of the remains of 18 Israeli hostages, Israel will release 180 deceased Gazans. The release will be performed simultaneously in accordance with the agreed mechanism and without public displays or ceremonies. Half of these releases will occur on day 1 and the other half will occur on day 7. Who are these 125 life sentence prisoners who are going to be released at this stage? We're talking about most likely people who are known in the Palestinian side, who have spent a very long time in Israeli prisons. They will give the priority for people who spent more in prison alongside considering their sentence. So the priority from the Palestinian perspective is they want to release the people who have been there the longest. And so first, and then reach the others. And also they consider the length and the sentence itself. For example, the longest serving prisoner, Nail al-Barghouthi, he was already released. He was released to a third country. And he spoke when he was released in Egypt. He was the longest serving Palestinian prisoner. And now it's most likely going to be a continuation of that. The names, that's going to be something sensitive. Israel will insist on not really publishing the names up until the last second, so that there wouldn't be an option for the families of those who will be released, as in the Palestinian prisoners who were potentially active in the resistance, so that the Israelis wouldn't have a chance to go and challenge it with the Israeli Supreme Court. Although the chances wouldn't be very high, chances would be slim for the Supreme Court to go against a government decision, especially in relation to a war that's happening. So they will release, of course, at the time you will see and hear a lot of criticism coming from people in Israel who don't want to release any Palestinian, but they will be released alongside over 1,111 Palestinian prisoners and Palestinian bodies too. 9. Status of the hostages and prisoners. On day 10, Hamas will provide the complete information, proof of life and medical status report, proof of death on each of the remaining hostages. In exchange, Israel will provide complete information on the Palestinian prisoners that were detained from the Gaza Strip since 7th of October and the numbers of deceased Gazans held in Israel. Hamas commits to ensure the health, welfare, and security of the hostages during the ceasefire. 10. Remaining hostages released upon agreement. The negotiation on the necessary arrangements for a permanent ceasefire should be completed within 60 days. Should be completed. This is where things get a little bit tricky. Upon agreement, the remaining hostages, living and deceased, from the list of 58 provided by Israel will be released. In case negotiations of the arrangement for a permanent ceasefire are not concluded within the aforementioned time period, the temporary ceasefire may be extended under conditions and for a duration to be agreed upon by the parties, so long as the parties are negotiating in good faith. This is the trickiest clause so far. Good faith, and if they agree and if they don't agree. Now, guarantors. The mediators / guarantors, US, Egypt, Qatar, will guarantee that the ceasefire will continue for the 60-day period and for any agreed upon extension. Will guarantee that serious discussions will be held on the necessary agreements for a permanent ceasefire and will make every effort to ensure the completion of the above-mentioned negotiations. 12. Envoy presides. Special Envoy Ambassador Steve Witkoff would come to the region to finalize the agreement. Steve Witkoff will preside over the negotiations. This is the guarantee, or the supposed guarantee, that the Palestinian side demanded from the American side, in the position of Steve Witkoff directly himself being in charge, so that he can have that pressure that is usually applied on the Israelis, but the Israelis can get away with it, usually. Then President Trump, the third clause that is relating to President Trump in this agreement. President Trump will personally announce the ceasefire agreement. The United States and President Trump are committed to working to ensure that good faith negotiations continue until a final agreement is reached. So these were the clauses of the framework for a permanent ceasefire. They're calling it a framework for a permanent ceasefire, but this includes 60 days, no confirmation that it will be extended, but with more and stronger guarantees coming from the American side following a Palestinian request to the Americans so that they can have more responsibility and force Israel to take action, especially if Benjamin Netanyahu tries to, in any last second, withdraw from the agreement or wage another war against the people of Gaza. Now, where is Benjamin Netanyahu? What is happening in Israel? What are the responses? Well, there are several reports in Israel that Israel accepted the ceasefire agreement and that now it's in Hamas's hands whether they accept it or not. This shows you that there has been somewhat of an update since yesterday's reports that Hamas accepted a ceasefire. Why? Because, well, if Hamas accepted a ceasefire yesterday and then we have this new ceasefire framework now, that means there were a couple of slight changes, unless that is Israel is portraying this in this way so that they can show that the ceasefire agreement is in their favor, so that Benjamin Netanyahu would have a bit of a less difficult time between himself and his radical members of the cabinet, especially Smotrich and Ben Gvir, who have been silent now. Smotrich threatened before, we spoke about this. He said earlier on that I'm warning against any temporary ceasefire. We need to continue full force up until we completely dismantle the Hamas. It's only by military pressure will we get an agreement. Now, all of a sudden, Benjamin Netanyahu, he is going to undergo a routine checkup, and Levine will be replacing him. Ministers were not informed about the medical procedure. This is a very important bit. Why is Benjamin Netanyahu undergoing a routine checkup now? Why are they calling it routine? If he is being replaced by Levine, that means that there's something serious. That's not something routine. If he has to be replaced, someone has to take his position, something not very routine-ish is happening. There's a serious procedure going. If it's a normal checkup, he doesn't have to be replaced. Secondly, why is he not informing the ministers? Usually the prime minister would tell the ministers, I'm going to undergo a routine health check, and Levine will be replacing me. You continue your work as normal. But according to this report, the statement from the Prime Minister's office, Netanyahu will undergo routine medical examination today, but no further details were provided. The government confirmed that the Justice Minister will take over from 6 a.m., although the ministers were not informed what medical procedure was involved. Again, there's something fishy going on here, especially because we're on that day where the ceasefire is being declared, and so reports that Israel accepted it. Again, some of the ministers are silent in Israel, maybe so they don't put themselves in a very difficult position in objecting the war or criticizing Netanyahu, but all of a sudden Netanyahu is disappearing and he is not going he's not going to tell them anything to do with the ceasefire, which leads us to the developments on the ground, especially with the Palestinian resistance. The Palestinian resistance is increasing its actions against the genocide state, with the latest action being taken by the Al-Qassam brigades under what they call David Stones. They have been carrying out this new operation in Gaza, in the northern parts of Gaza, like the other operations they were carrying out in the south. And one of them was this one here called David Stones. And they're continuing their operations. I shared one with you yesterday. And this is East Khan Yunis, targeting vehicles and Israeli IDF terrorists in that area by the Al-Qassam brigades, the armed wing of Hamas. They're again showing that they're continuing their actions all across of the Gaza Strip. Khan Yunis in particular, it's a very complex area. Israel has been in and out of Khan Yunis for multiple times. By the way, at one point, Israel said that they dismantled all of the tunnel system inside of Khan Yunis. And despite all of that, the Palestinian resistance is still there. Israel claims that they displaced the majority of the population there to Al-Mawasi area. The majority of the Gazan population have been pushed into from an already densely populated area to an area about 20 square kilometers. But the Palestinian resistance is still active in that area. And here they're saying that they were luring Israeli terror forces to a tunnel opening, and then they targeted them, they exploded it, and they targeted them directly. After that, the Palestinian resistance exploded 3 buildings that the genocide forces were in that area. Again, very, very complicated stuff. And we're talking about Khan Yunis. The Palestinian resistance is still showing maps. They are showing you exactly where they're targeting the Israeli terror forces. They're monitoring every move that they have. And one question arises: if Israel has the capacity to assassinate people within tunnels, how are they not seeing these people above the ground, monitoring them, and having this sophisticated and advanced surveillance system from under the ground live? They're showing everything live. And then again, they show how they prepare everything against the genocide forces inside of the Gaza Strip, in that area specifically, in Khan Yunis. And they're monitoring here the entry of the Israeli terror forces to that area from a very, very close distance. I mean, you can see high quality camera recording them, what they're doing, their whereabouts, the movement, even some of their communication, by the way. And the fact that the Palestinian resistance is releasing this now, very shortly after the campaign had happened, shows that they're very comfortable in those areas and they're not finding it very difficult. And in this move here, one of the Palestinian fighters using a Yasin 105, which is a Palestinian-made RPG, targeting the Israeli tanks. And look how close again they are to the Israeli tanks. This one was when they exploded a building, 3 buildings actually, a lot of smoke coming out of the area, with the Israeli evacuation helicopters coming very quickly after to evacuate those who were killed and those who were injured in that area. It took them several hours, according to multiple reports. And the Palestinian resistance didn't really stop there. We had another ambush by the Al-Quds, Saraya Al-Quds, which is the armed wing of the PIJ. They also had an ambush against the Israeli terror forces, this time in Shuja'iyya, against an Israeli force that was there hiding. Again, Saraya Al-Quds is considered to be the second largest group from the Palestinian resistance after Al-Qassam brigades, the armed wing of Hamas. And here again, they're showing how they're directly monitoring from the tunnels everything, and then having a trap for, look how many soldiers are there, over a dozen approximately, and then exploding the building with them in that area, and that's in the Shuja'iyya area. Shuja'iyya, another part of Gaza that Israel has been attacking very heavily in recent weeks and ever since the beginning of the war, really. Showing you that it's not only one resistance movement operating, multiple resistance movements operating in a very, very calculated way, over the ground, under the ground, intelligence, gathering information, targeting successfully and withdrawing successfully. Israel hasn't been able to hit them, and they did not know where they're coming from. And the Israeli forces in Gaza, by the way, they are behaving or conducting their actions in such a way that proves they're very amateurs. They don't really know what they're doing. The ambushes that took place in South Gaza a couple of weeks back, they had 3 ambushes that were very, very similar. 3 ambushes in the same part of the Gaza Strip, and they were all targeted in the same way. Yet Benjamin Netanyahu is claiming that we almost dismantled them and we almost got it done. Clearly, there's a very, very big gap between these claims coming from Netanyahu and his government to what's happening on the ground. That's why there are reports now that Israel is moving towards a ceasefire agreement. Moving on to the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about, Israel is showing more concerns over the sanctions. There was this report here in the Middle East talking about the Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar saying that an arms embargo will lead to a second Holocaust, according to him, and the end of the state of Israel. Quite dramatic, using the Holocaust again to justify a genocide. They always like to use that card. And as if, they're not doing anything. Israel's foreign minister said that an arms embargo on his country would lead to the elimination of the state of Israel and a second Holocaust. Saar was speaking on Tuesday at an international conference on anti-Semitism in Jerusalem. How ironic. He's speaking on anti-Semitism, committing a genocide, and threatening warning from a second Holocaust. If, God forbid, he said, the calls and actions of countries and politicians for an arms embargo on Israel succeed, the result will be the destruction of Israel and a second Holocaust. The comments came as Spain this week called on European countries to suspend arms shipments amid Israel's ongoing siege on Gaza. At a meeting of the Madrid group, Spain's foreign minister called for an immediate suspension of Europe's cooperation deal with Israel and an embargo on arms shipments. I mean, really, as we say, good morning. Isn't it a little bit too late? The report continued that Germany, France, the UK, Italy, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Morocco, and Brazil were among those present at the meeting. What is the meaning of actions or statements by politicians and countries to impose an arms embargo on Israel, said Saar in response? If such moves succeed, Israel will simply be destroyed. There will be another Holocaust on the soil of the land of Israel. This is essentially a way to deprive the Jewish people of means to defend themselves. Means to defend themselves. Again, means that they so lacked during the long years of exile and during the Holocaust. They continue that the largest suppliers of weapons to Israel are the United States, Germany, and Italy. Several nations, including France, Spain, and the UK, have either paused supply of some weapons or have suspended export licenses. So they are worried. I mean, undeniably, if that's not a worry, then what is a worry? Gideon Saar is outright saying that it will be a Holocaust and will be the end of the state of Israel. And how can they do that? And also during a conference on anti-Semitism. The following thing that I want to talk to you about is 1984, not the book, but the state, the United States of America, with Marco Rubio's recent statements about this new visa policy to the United States. Guess what? Guess what it includes? Preventing foreign nationals with anti-Israeli views from traveling to the United States. Let's hear what Marco Rubio had to say in this video and have our comment on this video. Let's hear him out.
Under President Trump, the United States will stand with the Jewish people. We have implemented a vigorous new visa policy that will prevent foreign nationals from coming to the United States to foment hatred against our Jewish community. We are holding international organizations and nations accountable for rhetoric against Israel that resurfaces in the manifesto of monsters, like Iran and Sarah's killer. But we do see an eventual light at the end of this long tunnel of suffering. One can imagine a Middle East in which the Abraham Accords eventually reign. So thank you for the opportunity to address you.
I mean, wow. The United States, Marco Rubio at least, saying that now you would need to be checked. Are you going to come to the United States? Sure. But before we welcome you, what do you think of Israel? Like Germany, by the way, they put it as part of their application for citizenship in Germany, asking people, what do you think of Israel? I mean, what are we talking about? Another province of Israel? What is this exactly? What do you think of Israel? I'm coming here to live. What do you, I want to, the American dream. You know, people from across the world want to follow the American dream and succeed in the United States of America. Let them come. The country was built on immigrants, wasn't it? Why do you need to ask them about Israel? Plus this excuse about this, protect the Jewish community. Which Jewish community? Jewish Voices for Peace or the Jews protesting against Israel 24/7? What Jewish community? Stop the BS, stop the garbage. They're still trying to fool people and spew this propaganda. Jews in the United States have been the most active from the global population of Jews, by the way. The Jewish people of America and Canada. They have been so active, and some moments are led fiercely against Zionism and against Israel and against them speaking in their name. But we still have Marco Rubio trying to push this garbage on us 24/7. We're trying to protect the Jewish community, like the garbage that the British government was trying to put on the population. Oh, who said it's anything to do with the Jewish community? The Jewish people, the real Jewish people, are protesting against Israel. It's not a problem, never has been a problem. Zionism hijacked Judaism and falsely speaks on behalf of Judaism. Up until when are we going to continue with this garbage? But they're frustrated. Rubio and all these politicians and leaders, they're frustrated by the fact that some Jews speak against Israel. That's why they try as much as possible to act like they don't exist. For example, they wouldn't bring Jewish people on mainstream media that much. They wouldn't show you the Jewish-led movements protesting against the Zionists in Israel. They wouldn't show you senior Jewish men and women, religious and non-religious people, protesting against the state of Israel constantly 24/7, dedicating their life against this Zionist project. But they will come and tell you as if, we're trying to protect the Jewish people and we're trying to protect the Jewish community from this anti-Semitism. Now, the second commentary is going to be about Piers Morgan this time. I fail to understand, firstly, why people, anyway, in general, why do people seek the opinion, anyway, of people like Piers Morgan? Piers Morgan, part of the cartel of Rupert Murdoch, a man who had ties with Jeffrey Epstein, a man who has been supportive of Israel since the beginning. We all remember the days of the do you condemn 24/7. You brush your teeth, do you condemn? You go to the toilet, do you condemn? You breathe, do you condemn? Everything condemn. Abhorrent statements. And the man was legitimizing the slaughter of children in war not long ago. But just because the man is changing his tone slightly, they're telling you, oh, look, Piers Morgan changes. He didn't change anything. Piers Morgan wants the views, he wants to make the money, he wants popularity at the end of the day. And if that requires him to have a certain session with the Israeli ambassador, then he will, like he had in his recent show with the Israeli ambassador to Britain, as we can see in this video here.
Do you know how many Hamas terrorists you killed and how many children you killed?
I don't have the numbers, but let me tell you one thing: we
And
never target civilians. So this question is irrelevant.
How many children have you killed?
Piers, Israel is not
Oh, how
killing
many?
children. Israel is not killing children. Hamas is using them as
Israel is
human
killing
shields.
children every single day.
Pierce,
Why
this
pretend
is a blood
otherwise?
label you're putting on Israel.
Why
You know it's
pretend-
not true.
What? No, it's not actually. And what you're trying to do is be very weaselly with your words.
No, I'm not.
The truth is, you are killing a lot of children.
You
would
know
argue
you know why it's caused.
Hang on, let me
Because
finish.
Hamas is using them as human shields, and you know
Let me
that.
finish my question to you. You are killing a lot of children on a daily basis. That is indisputable. My interesting question for you is, how come you know exactly how many Hamas terrorists you've killed, but you have no idea how many children you've killed?
Pierce, please ask this question to the people that can give you the answer. I don't have the answer.
Who has the answer?
Please don't ask me
Who
questions.
has the answer?
that-
Who has the answer?
I don't have the answer. And I will tell
You're
you
the
something.
Israeli ambassador to my country. Who else should I ask?
Well-
when you launch a blockade for nearly 3 months to a population which already has seen much of their possessions, their land, their buildings, their homes decimated by bombardment after bombardment, when you say that you're going to launch a blockade on aid and food to a population where 50% are under 18, you are pursuing, it seems to me, as Ehud Olmert said, a policy of starvation towards, obviously, because of the nature of the population in Gaza, of a lot of children. And that is a war crime. I mean, what else do you call it? The problem is that whilst you're saying all this and trying to justify it, you've got people like Smotrich coming out and making it absolutely crystal clear what the real plan is, which is to completely clean out Gaza of all the Palestinians and get them into, quotes, a third country. That is a form of genocide. It's a deliberate targeting of people based on ethnicity and displacing them from their homes and killing a lot of them in the process. I don't know what else you would call it. I've resisted using the word genocide about this, but when I watched what Mr. Smotrich was saying and studied the exact words that he said, it is very hard to reach any other conclusion than that he is waging a strategy of genocide and would like to cleanse, as he put it, the whole Gaza Strip of all the Palestinians. So you can try and dress up that blockade, which is what it was for 3 months, where we saw the starving children you say you're concerned about, but you've got Smotrich there actually laying bare the real plan, which is to get all the Palestinians out of Gaza. And that is a form of genocide, isn't it? What else do you call it? How many?
I mean, everything that Piers Morgan said has been happening from day one. That's number one. Secondly, did Piers Morgan just realize that the Zionists are killing children in Gaza? People were tagging him since the beginning of the war, sending him all of the images and footage of everyone being slaughtered in Gaza from day one. From day one. Yet despite all of that, he was still justifying everything and telling you that actually, no, people do get killed in war. For example, he had an interview with Tucker Carlson just a couple of months ago, back in February, by the way, in which he said the following. Let's have a look.
If you're intentionally killing civilians, you probably shouldn't beat your chest and brag about it. You know, maybe you can make the
I agree with that.
Maybe you make the case that we had to do it or whatever, but you should.
I agree.
You should weep, and that's evil, and you should just say it's evil. And I know it's like really threatening to
Is it evil?
Ben Shapiro to say that or whatever, but
Is it evil?
to kill civilians on purpose, yeah, it is. I think it is.
Really?
Kids and children. Well, how is it not actually?
In a war?
Well, you can call it whatever you want. How is it right to kill women and children?
I didn't say, well, because I think there is a moral right behind you if you are literally.
To kill women and children?
If there's a world war that threatens the entire, if it threatens the entire world, yes.
Some people killed your kids, like your 8-year-old. Like,
Well, obviously,
how
it's your
is
own
that
children, of
morally
course.
justifiable?
Well, because actually you have to. Well, by your criteria,
It's disgusting.
okay, it's nothing's so no war is morally justified.
I mean, I think it's pretty hard to justify. I mean, yeah, I'm
Any
sure,
war.
you know, a pure defensive action, sure. But all I'm saying, look, it's all ugly. It's all hard to stomach. I've actually seen some of it up close, super ugly.
You can say that. You can say you hate it.
May I
But
finish?
the fact you
May
quibble
I
with it
finish?
being
Let me just
morally
say,
justified.
To intentionally kill non-combatants, women and children, I think we can say that's wrong. In fact, I thought that was the thing we were fighting against.
I'm clear. I mean, Piers Morgan, that's 3 months ago, saying that basically, you know, killing people who are, you know, non-combatants is not evil. Is it evil? Is it evil to kill non-combatants? According to him, no. What's the change now? I mean, some people are quoting him over the Gaza situation as well, and the genocide and the term and using a genocide. First and foremost, this man has been a part of the Rupert Murdoch dynasty. And despite the fact that he's trying to distance himself, at the end of the day, Piers Morgan has been tied with Rupert Murdoch for a very long time. We all know who Rupert Murdoch is. Apart from his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Ever since the beginning of the genocide, the man has been standing and taking a position of Israel and of Zionism, the position of manipulation. Even if he comes today or tomorrow or the day after and starts to change a position here and there, and still, by the way, spewing venom while he's mentioning this position by labeling the Palestinian resistance and delegitimizing the Palestinian resistance, and in fact still legitimizing Israel and its genocide by even bringing the genocide representative, which is the ambassador. She's the ambassador of a genocidal entity. Who are you talking about? You don't talk about a normal person. You don't talk about a normal state representative, a normal ambassador. This is part of the justification. Secondly, people like him shouldn't even have the influence even on people to make their minds up. At the end of the day, the man works for money. There's other people on the other side even blame him for being like anti-Semitic, for bringing people on who potentially are harmful for the state of Israel. Why? Because, well, the Palestinian opinion is more popular, isn't it? Why? Because it's more logical, it's more accurate, it's more correct, it's more truthful. Whereas on the other side, all you hear is lies, deception, and people twisting words and trying to get themselves out of the mess that they got themselves in for all of the time that they're debating. Oh, I don't know. Ask the relevant purpose. Ask the relevant people, as if they don't know anything that's happening. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the information. How many kids were killed? Oh, I don't know. You need to ask the representative in the army that left a while ago. And I'm not really sure, but you know, Hamas used them as human shields when the evidence of the human shields has been against Israel 24/7. They use people as human shields and they get rid of them. They put pictures of them using people as human shields and being proud about it. And that was the last bit that I wanted to share with you in this live stream. As usual, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Stay blessed, take care in the meantime, and I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Salam.